here. It's the penultimate Bonfire, I think, team, is that right? And we're absolutely thrilled that Garrett is going to join us today, and that Lego Foundation are part, because so many of us have such a wonderful relationship with Lego, and so many of us have used Lego to be creatively brave. So I'm not going to talk. I'm just going to hand you over to the wonderful. I think you're going to. He shared a little bit of what this is going to be like, and I think you're going to love it. So welcome, Garrett. It's great to have you at the Bonfire today.
Fantastic. Thank you, Helena. Yeah, so my name is Garrett Jaeger, and people are going to be coming in, and I'll try to reintroduce. But really, it's really not me. It's about a lot of these experiences that I hope to share that we promote and work hard to bring to children throughout the world. Via the Lego Foundation. So what I wanted to do today, yeah, I could present a bunch of materials, and I will, and I could show you a slide deck and follow it slide by slide, but I don't like that, and I'm anticipating many of you would rather get your hands on some things. So what I'm going to start off today, and I'm going to share my screen throughout. You're going to see me kind of, like I was telling Paul and Helena just a moment ago, things are going to wobble a little bit during this presentation. And by wobble, I mean some parts of it are going to run really smoothly, other parts are going to get a little awkward. And I think that's what creative bravery is. And I hope that this comes through through the presentation and through the experience. There's many different contexts in which, if I wanted to present this material, I would make it nice and tight. So for example, if I was presenting at OECD, I would present it differently. But in this case, I think we're going to take some chances today. So what I would like to do, and I'm going to share my screen for just a moment here, and I'm going to be going, like I said, I'm going to be going back and forth trying to make some things happen here. I'm going to share my screen. Hopefully, if you can give me a little rev of the engine to see if you've got this screen coming up here. Are you seeing just this slide deck here with learning through play?
Yeah.
Cool. All right, fantastic. And so learning through play, one of the things I want to introduce, and I'm going to start here because I think it's really important for the Lego Foundation. One, because what drives us is learning through play. Children are our mentors about learning, about living, and we are inspired by them. The relationship between play and creativity is one that we are focused on, and one that we think is quite difficult to grasp at the same time. When you're experiencing it, there's hardly anything else that exists in the world. And so I wanted to point out this piece. And an interesting point was when we had a Lego Idea Conference in March. We had spent 9 months preparing for this in-person conference, just like many of you have, either for this festival or for other festivals, anticipated to see your friends, play with them. But we had to move all of our conference into this digital space, and we had a week to do it. And it was mayhem. Now, one of the things that was ironic about it was that the theme of our conference was creativity. And one of the pieces that messaging we really wanted to bring home was that uncertainty is a catalyst for creativity. And we were thrown into the pit of uncertainty by not knowing how this was going to unfold. And so just to give you kind of a theoretical backdrop, the uncertainty that we're talking about could be anything. It could be the uncertainty of this global pandemic that's going on. It could be the uncertainty of, I'm not really sure what the person across from the table is thinking about, or I'm not really sure what I'm going to do next with my hands, okay? And so it's very simple, but learning through play actually embraces uncertainty and keeps reintroducing uncertainty. And why do we do that? Because we feel that uncertainty is what we have. It's happening all the time. If you're growing, if you're learning, if you're aging, if you're developing, uncertainty is a sign that you are experiencing new things, okay? And when we play, when we engage in learning through play, it reintroduces uncertainty as something that, yes, it's still uncertain, but we're more comfortable with experiencing in that. And it actually helps to catalyze creativity, because if we need to have a reason to be creative. And I know that sounds kind of motivating and maybe creating creativity as a tool, but if you think about it in a really simple way, when we have uncertainty, when we don't know what's going to happen next, we have to be creative. Otherwise, what would be the purpose of it? Otherwise, we would do the same things that we've always done. So I'm going to just start there. Next, we're going to do a couple of things. Helena and I are going to talk about some of the things that are going on in Lego Foundation, some cool concepts, some theories, but I want you all to have your hands, and I want you to be playing while we're doing this. And what I want you to do is I want you to consider, what is a self-portrait? Now you'll see I have an image here available? Everybody able to see this Bob Dylan self-portrait album cover? Okay, there's many ways to capture a self-portrait. You see there's a picture of Bob Dylan's album self-portrait, which is supposed to be a representation musically of himself. Down below that, we have Hannock Piven's work, where he creates these images and caricatures of people using found objects. You can see Vincent van Gogh. Now, I'm not trying to point out here these, eminent artists creating these beautiful pieces of art. That's not what this is about. But what it is about is thinking about a likeness that is staring you right in the face every day, literally when you look in the mirror, and how going through the process of creating a self-portrait brings into question, if this is so hard, and many of you, if you haven't done a self-portrait, you're going to find out quickly, it is a difficult process. You're going to see things that you don't want to see, and you're going to put things down there that aren't really there. Okay, and maybe I'm telling you what's going to happen, but I think you'll discover these things yourself. So what I would like you to do is to go around your house, go around what's near you, find any materials. I've got Post-it notes, I've got AirPods, I've got a bag of batteries, I've got a tape measure. I want you to go around and find materials. And it could be that you put something together like Hannock Piven, where you arrange them to look like you. You can grab a piece of paper and pencils, whatever materials you want. And I want you to get together the materials that you need for the next 40 minutes to create a self-portrait. Okay, so I'm going to give you time to do that. And while you do that, I'll give you, let's say, 2 minutes. 2 minutes, go run around your house and then come back. All right, have fun. And your mic's on, your earphones on, so Helena and I are going to keep talking. Okay, so Helena.
Yes.
Hi, good afternoon. So we are going to try to have a bonfire here. I guess what I wanted to share with you is some of the thinking that goes on in the foundation, what it is that the LEGO Foundation can contribute to this conversation that's been going on at the Creative Bravery Festival. Do you have any questions about what LEGO Foundation does or what we can add to this conversation?
I think one of the reasons that we were talking, and it came from a conversation with Paul, was this idea that very often with Lego, you have a manual, and the kids kind of, kids and big kids, you build the toy with the manual. And what interested us is, and it came from an idea of Paul, is it's a little bit like an education. You have this manual that you worked in, you create a kind of building, and then you leave it. And we wondered, and what we liked about what Lego do and Lego Foundation is that they kind of get rid of the manual, the manual goes apart. What would happen if there was no sort of diagrams to follow? And it's a little bit like just exactly what you're talking about with play and that idea. We don't say to our kids, right, off you go for an hour, and there's the exact manual to follow in terms of how you play. They just find things around the house or whatever, and they play with them. Mm-hmm. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, Helena, one of the things that you bring up is by the purists of the people, those who love creativity and the creative process, will give us pushback on saying, well, you provide these instructions. And if you think about the creativity in the way that many of us understand it, is it's pretty difficult. There's a threshold theory that says if you don't have enough experience with a particular material or medium, it's difficult to do it. But also, if you have too much experience with it, it's hard to break those conventions or the ways that you view things. And so we like to try to think of, like, when is it appropriate to have instructions? And we talk about those instructions, with Lego bricks and building these. For example, I was showing some people yesterday, I got the Nintendo Lego build, which is super cool, and I'm geeking out over it as a child of the 90s. But I followed the instructions for quite a while, and there was a satisfying piece. But you know what? I'm going to take that apart later, and it's going to get thrown into the bucket with everything else. And one day I'm going to find a little piece with Nintendo on it and figure out something cool. So I think that's important. I think following instructions and knowing when not to follow the instructions are an important part of the creative process. And I'm going to talk to this a little bit more when I share some of the resources that we've been developing at the Lego Foundation around what we mean by creativity. And one of the things that we really prioritize is how it has to be not just original. You can think of the standard definition of creativity being original and useful. We want things to be original. We want them to be unique at some level, but we want them to be meaningful. And that's the part where learning through play becomes really important for us. is that it's something that is meaningful for me, and I make this experience happen for you, and something that isn't just me telling you what to do. So I think we got our 2 minutes. Everybody have their materials? Now, before we go, I have another challenge. Now, this is the part where it gets a little hairy. I want to see what you're doing. If you're going to be creating a self-portrait, and if you've done this before, you're going to have a picture of yourself, maybe even the camera in front of you, or you find a mirror. I want you to split your screen for me, okay? And why is that? Before we begin, I want to be able to see what your hands are doing. One of the things that we've been seeing a lot, not only in our Lego Idea Conference, but in distance learning around the world right now, is how do we take this from a grid of faces, talking heads, if you will, or not talking heads, muted heads many times, to something where I can see what you're actually doing. So what I would like for you to do is to take some time now, take some of these materials, maybe recruit one of your partners or family members to find something to split your screen. It could be that you log in with your phone, and you have a phone and you set it up here, you log into Creative Bravery Festival, and you have another feed over here where we can see what you're doing with your hands. Could be my daughter's glasses. I put them up to the screen. Now you can see what I'm going to make with my hands. I've also got some binder clips where I can bind this to my screen. I'm going to try to figure out a way to do this cleverly without breaking things. Breaking is okay as well. Okay. Now, let me give you some examples for inspiration. To take a moment to look. I don't know if you can see my screen when I'm screen sharing, though. That's the difficulty, right? Yeah. I'm going to go back to the slides here. Here's some examples from one of my good friends, Amos Blanton. If you're looking at the screen share, actually, let me show you what I'm doing first. Do you see how you can see my hands now? These are my daughter's psychedelic rainbow shades. Yeah, you can use your phone, exactly. And I got this binder clip. I'm tying it to or pinching it to my monitor. Starting to get somewhere here. So there's one example. You can start to see my hands. Now, part of that is you're going to be tweaking this. Now let me go back to my screen share and I'm going to give you some more examples, okay? Now, we live in this world. That's the other part, right? Is we're all trying to figure out how to navigate this Zoom world. So I'm going to try to take advantage of some of the technologies here. So if you look at the slide that I'm sharing now, and this is my good friend and former colleague at the foundation, Amos Blanton, where he has been working on creating these mirrors that he clips and puts on and splits the screen on his iPad. And you can see on many of these, there's a picture of the face, your traditional feed from Zoom. And then the bottom half, thanks to a mirror that he's cut, and you can see his hands down below. And you'll see even in the bottom one here, Aaron Graves, another colleague or friend, if you will, created an Instructable, how to 3D print a video call mirror tool. So these are some of the inspirations. Now, let me get back off of this. I'm going to stop sharing again. Here's another way to do it. Grab that handy piece of tin foil, find the shiny side, and see if that's going to work. I'm going to try a bunch of different ways, and what I want you to do is to do the same. So try to split that screen. I'm going to rely on my daughter's rainbow shades here for a moment first. And what I want you to do is to then, once you have a nice little setup, I would like if you could start building your self-portrait. Okay, I'm getting there. So that on one side of the screen, one portion of the screen, this is, oh, Geraldine, that's looking good. Now you got to find a way to get it to sit there, right? Penny, nice. What is that? Yeah, all right, Penny, you're getting there. I see Heather's got a drop down. Nice work, Heather. All right, we're getting closer. I see Paul's got a camera set up there. But so this is a way, if you think about it, ultimately, you could have a section over here where my face is, and then down here, I gotta do more work on this. I'm gonna be able to see what you're creating with your self-portrait, okay? I got my iPads here. This could be a good nose, maybe. Let's see if I start there. Now this is gonna take some balancing, figure out how to do this. We're getting there. Okay, now if I move the clip over here, on the far side, it'll stay better. Now, I know this is that dead air I was warning Paul and Helena about, a little bit of dead air while we're trying to figure things out. So that's okay.
It's exciting. This is the
Yeah.
first.
I
We've
love
never
the
had
dead
this.
air.
It's never.
I don't
Yeah.
think the air is dead.
No, I've got a mirror, so I'm trying to work.
Yeah.
That.
Yeah, that's tricky.
It is tricky, isn't
But
it? But it's a great idea.
This is what we're trying to get at. So not only do I just have you tell me, hey, look what I created, but I get to see what you're doing. And the reason why, not just because I want to see what you're doing, and that's a really important part, but the creative process is much more insightful than the creative output. Okay, you may come up with something beautiful, not to to say that that's nothing amazing to behold as well. But what I'm really interested in is seeing, what does this process look like, so that I can see what you're doing, I can see you, and we can see each other's work. Okay, now let me go back. I'm going to share some screen, and Helena, please chime in. I would love any questions or follow-up through this. So as we go through this, here's some of the Lego Foundation. Here's a lot of what I was saying a moment ago. What do we have in the world right now? Many times we have this great uncertainty. I'm living in the US right now, and my daughter was going to kindergarten for the first time, and then they said she couldn't. She's going from online to in person, and now they're saying the in person is going to go back to online before they even meet in person. So all these things are introducing great uncertainty. And what do we need? We need some creativity. And how do we get it through this learning through play? Now, what's the difference between learning through play? I alluded to it, the difference between learning through play and creativity. I alluded to it in the description for this workshop. And what I was getting at is, there's many times where you're playing and you're not necessarily coming up with some sort of creative output. What you're doing is you're trying to engage with this thing that has inspired you. And you're trying to learn from it. It's learning from you, whether it's inanimate or not. You're trying to figure out how to play with this. And it doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to come up with a creative solution, but you're going to find different ways to look at the world. Okay. And through that process of learning through play, we become more familiar with uncertainty, something that we know is part of it, and something that children have no problems embracing for the most part. And at some point we get domesticated or adulterated in a way that we're always trying to create an output. Now, what is this learning through play? So at the foundation, we've done a literature review, done some meta-analyses. Oh, Geraldine, that mirror is looking fantastic. You're getting there, you're getting so close. These 5 characteristics: we have joyful, we have socially interactive, actively engaging, meaningful, and iterative. Now, I'm already seeing many of these characteristics pop up when I look at your screens right now, when I see what you're going through and the struggles of trying to get these mirrors to work. And they can be a struggle, okay? Is that what we're trying to get at is joyful. Hopefully you're enjoying the fact that this is messy and you're not sure what's happening. Actively engaging, I'm asking you to build stuff with your own hands. Socially interactive, I can see a bunch of people's work. I can see Beatrice's notepad. I think she's still working on some tweaks there. Kenny looks like he's digging into something interesting. I'm not sure what he's building yet, but he looks like he's thinking hard. But then we have this meaningful piece. Now, many of us, a self-portrait is a reflection, but at the same time, what's meaningful is you're doing it right here in front of all of us. And it's not something that you're referring out into the world, it's something that you're doing. And then iterative, I'm still trying to figure out how to get these glasses to work better. I can't get the angle quite right. So through that process of making mistakes and being playful, we are going to get somewhere. Now, if we worry more about what that output looks like and whether it's going to be evaluated, now we start getting into some of the creative process. Let me get my hands over here a little better. So for now, we'd like to, at the Lego Foundation, we like to focus on learning through play first. So getting children to engage in these characteristics, for facilitators and educators to engage in those characteristics first, and then worry about those turning into creativity. And how do we connect those? We are focused on these particular skill development at the Lego Foundation. Not to say that learning content isn't important, but we like to have some sort of constructivism, some sort of, we want you to use your hands, we want you to actually do things in the world. And so these holistic skills, one of which is creativity. We have social, physical, emotional, and cognitive. I would argue that creativity can cover all of those, but those are particular outcomes that we're looking to help develop within children. any questions about connecting play and creativity at this point? I would be glad to take them. A minute while I do that. Heather, nice. Oh, so Heather, you have 2 feeds. Is that correct? Heather Cassidy? You have a...
Hi. Yeah, I've put my phone up like you said. And it's, I can't quite work out the angle. I'm having to build the face facing not facing me because of the direction of my camera on my phone.
Yeah. Lamis, I can
okay.
see what's going on. Yeah. Well, that's one way of doing it. There's many ways to do it. Lamis, I see to those glasses. I see you. It's a small version, but I can see what's going on over there.
I'm also trying something else with Pyrex dish, which I think actually could work. But let's
are you
see.
adding water?
No, it's just a glass container.
Oh, and look at Penny Hay over there. So she's holding up a mirror. She's doing the yeoman's work over there, holding it while drawing. Are you trying to draw through the reflection, Penny? Like, are you reversing your drawing, or are you looking down?
Oh, sorry. I've only got 2 hands. So I'm drawing from the screen. So the mirror is reflecting the drawing, but I'm drawing myself on the screen, which is really hard.
Yeah. So can you recruit somebody to help with that, or can you find a way to clip that or something?
I'm thinking as I'm drawing.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking through drawing.
That's fair too. Marcello, I see you playing around with some things over there. Whoa. Yeah. Oh, and Liz, what do you got going on over there? I see a blue line. Is that a mirror that you've got it split there? What am I seeing over here?
Masking tape.
Masking tape. And then are you creating 2 self-portraits?
Yeah, well, possibly.
A backup. Oh, Marcello, that is beautiful. So Kenny's getting the camera down low so you can kind of get an angle on it. That's cool. Wait, Kenny, you have 2. Ah, nice. See, that's another way of doing it. Yeah. See, Sophie's got the mirror going. Are you holding it, Sophie? All right, fantastic. Okay, so while we're going through this, Helena, do you have any other questions you wanted to throw? Because I'm going to talk about some other projects that we work on at the Lego Foundation that some of you might find interesting.
I think it's really, it's an interesting thing, isn't it? It's for our brains to kind of be working something out and listening and doing all of that. Personally, I've been delivering this festival from what somebody described as a changing room or a bathroom, and I always knew my mirrors were going to come in handy. So I'm delighted. Look, I'm so, I'm.
Oh, you got it reversed. I should be doing it. I have mirrors on my closet here too.
Right. It's also quite interesting, isn't it? As a teacher, there's that vulnerability when you start to share something. It's like that. I always think we've had a program here called Blue Peter, and as a teacher, when you start to demonstrate something and all eyes are on you, you can absolutely guarantee something's going to go wrong, and it's not going to work, and it makes us uncomfortable sometimes to share our own work with people. Even in as a lecturer, to show your own work that you've done can make you feel quite vulnerable, and I think that vulnerability is taken away when you say to students, not that I'm going to exhibit, but I'm going to play with this. And I think that play is a really beautifully forgiving word, I think. Oh,
right back at you.
So I can see me.
Go ahead, sorry.
Brilliant.
Yeah. Okay, so now I'm getting another angle. Paul, is this what you were doing too? Are you setting up your phone to kind of just pass through and change the angle?
Yeah, trying, probably feeling. I was trying to use my camera as well, but I just couldn't work out what I was doing.
Yeah, I'm trying to create my self-portrait here with a kind of a collage of post-it notes here. Okay, yeah, so the other part about this is I was just thinking now, this angle part of trying to think about me building, if I were to look at my screen and focus on the reflection rather than what I'm seeing. Because when I'm looking at self-portrait, I have to look at my image and then look at an image. This way I can actually look at the reflection on the screen without changing my eyes. So there's some angles here. You can imagine like perceptual learnings that children and adults can learn here. The angle, like I'm at a 45 and that seems to be the best angle right now. So you can imagine this is what learning through play can do for you, right? Because it gets you to ask questions that maybe wouldn't have been revealed to you if you had just done it in a simple, straightforward way of just creating the self-portrait. Now we got to think about how do we do this in a different way. So I'm going to play with that. I'm going to keep playing, but Helena, I'm going to talk to you about some creativity projects that we have at the foundation that I think some people are going to be keen on, okay? So I talked about holistic skills, some desirable outcomes for the foundation, but check out this cool project. So Lamise, Sophie, I think you're familiar with this one, and Paul, you might be familiar with it as well. But we worked with Creativity, Culture, and Education to work on this creative process toolkit. So here's an interesting piece where the Lego Foundation and working with Lego, trying to build a kit to build a mind mapping tool. Now in this case, what we did is we printed a series of words based on what we mean by creativity. So for example, I'm going to skip to this slide here for a moment. What we mean by creativity is kind of a white paper that we wrote. And by the way, I put QR codes here. If you wanted to actually see these documents, you can put your camera up to the QR and it'll take you to the website so you can download these documents. Through the our what we mean by creativity white paper, we've established what is it we're talking about, because there's so many loose ends around what is creativity. Now, our answer may not be the only answer, but for us working with children and learning through play, what we mean by creativity many times is that we're focused more on a process more than we are on an outcome. We're focused on everyday creativity more than we are about these eminent acts of amazing brilliance and genius, but just focusing in on the process for now and hoping that over time that this embracing and this practice and cultivation of a creative process will get us somewhere beautiful. So that suspension of that outcome, what we've done is we've focused in on this, what we are calling the connect, explore, transform model. So 3 phases of creativity. Now, it doesn't mean that you start off by connecting. It doesn't mean you go immediately from connecting to exploring, but what these bricks that you see on the screen now are 9 different bricks or 9 different colors of bricks based on these kind of concepts or these ideas. So what we ask children over time is we give them some give teachers professional development to talk about these concepts. And we ask children to start to reflect on their thinking. Many times what we do is we have them build or mind map a process that they just went through. And I'm going to show you in a moment, I actually have a digital version of this. I'm going to show you kind of what my process is going to look like. But what we do is we have you build this path of what you were thinking. And you'll see on the left, we have emotions. We have this happy or positive valence, something that's sad or negative, and then a white brick there where you can write down something that maybe doesn't fit into this box of 9 words. And what we ask people to do then is to map their thinking. Many times it's a reflection tool. And what's really cool about it is we see a similar pattern where in the beginning, everybody does a very linear, well, I was wondering what to do. And then I imagined some ways to solve this problem. Then I started building my solution to that problem. And then I took it apart because that didn't work. I reflected on it a little bit, and then I built it again, and then I tested it. And you can see how it can be a very linear process, but over time, we start to see children and adults start to create these amazing sculptures. It goes from a very linear process to them talking about emotions and many other pieces, okay? Now you can see over here on this slide we have some professional development, other activities that don't just rely on the brick. This isn't about the brick. This is about giving children the tools to think about, reflect on their creative process. And then once they're done with that reflection, maybe they use the tool to actually start planning creative processes or planning a solution to an outcome that they're encountering. To say, we've even seen 2 to 3 year olds using these tools. I know these, and it's crazy to think about, but using it for conflict resolution. We're seeing 5-year-olds talking about how they're going to do their, how they're going to play the game when they go out for recess on the playground. Some of the teachers are using these to plan lessons to say, well, here, I'm going to map what I did last week. Here's the activities. I had them build an idea, and then I had them test it, and then I had them share it. But I never actually gave them the time to go into this red area to let them connect, imagine, and listen. Imagine, wonder, and listen about what's going on. So then once they reflect on that mind mapping to see, oh, this is what I did, maybe in the future that'll allow them to become more aware of what they could do in planning moving forward. So this is one tool that we like to roll out, and we're testing it in the physical world, but we also, like I said, are doing this in the digital world as well. Now, I'm gonna get back to this in a moment before we wrap up later, but I'm gonna show you, after we go through this process and everybody reflects on the process, I'll show you a digital version of that toolkit. Any questions on what this is, what this means, this creative process toolkit?
I've got a quick question. Is that okay?
Yeah.
I was just about to type it, but I might as well ask it.
Yes,
it's
Penny.
really fascinating, and I've done quite a lot of research around these processes. Sorry, I've got a very noisy teenager next door. Have you done any work with Project Zero at all, with the artful thinking processes?
Yeah, exactly. So many of the people involved in Project Zero were advising us throughout the development of this toolkit. Between Project Zero, Pedagogy of Play, and a bunch of other creativity researchers and practitioners, teachers, messaging people, and trying to figure out how to make this as simple as possible. So yeah.
Brilliant. Because we often, I think, Helena, you said it, it's that whole notion of making creativity visible so it's understandable, and it's not this kind of slippery concept that's not in our lives every day. It is in our lives every day. Yeah, no, that's really interesting. Thanks, Garrett.
Yeah, of course. Anybody else have any questions about? I mean, it's a 3-step process. There's many other versions of this. We're just trying to make this as simple and as pragmatic for practitioners to use and for children to understand. And we've been quite pleasantly surprised by how quickly children start to get it. And in fact, at many points, they stop using the bricks and start talking about colors and say, you know, hey, Sophie, have you thought about adding a little more green here? Because you're doing a lot of wondering and you're doing a lot of sharing, but I haven't actually seen anything yet. Could you maybe start building and taking it apart so that we can see if it works? And so they start talking to each other with colors, which is a really beautiful thing to watch. So I do want to share these resources before we go back to revisiting our self-portraits here. And Liz, nice work, Liz. That's awesome. It's great to see that you're on your likeness is on the left, and then the one that you're creating is on the right of the masking tape. That's beautiful. So these resources, and I think the reason why I'm sharing these is it's not necessarily that we have a particular take that other people don't. What we're doing was we're trying to facilitate and convene a bunch of different perspectives. We have a Slack workspace that Creativity, Culture, and Education has brought together, and with the likes of Paul's been there, and Sophie and some other people. And one of the conversations I know we're having is around assessment. Is it necessary? Is it problematic? What's the use of assessment when it comes to creativity? And so you'll see in this middle piece of this current slide, and again, if you want to actually see it, you can scan it with the computer app on your phone, and it'll show a website to go to. What we did is we tried to bring a variety of different perspectives on what is creativity assessment, from these kind of quantitative measures where paper and pencil tests, doing divergent thinking tasks, to a documentation process, to how do they automate the evaluating creativity of scratch programming for kids, to we have a person who is in messaging and PR saying, hey, there's a problem here in the way we talk about this. And so what we want to do is we don't want to say necessarily that it's black or white or it's this or that, but we like to get people together and share their ideas and see how they're different. And by looking at how we can view creativity assessment as different, because frankly, the conversation around assessment, I don't think is going to go away anytime soon. But what we can do is engage in a way that we can provide alternatives or put together different perspectives on this so that people are in the same room together. But in those collection of essays in that middle document that I posted here, you're going to see a really lively conversation and a lot of taking risks by the writers, actually, to say, here's where we think things should be going or where they could be going. And I believe we have 11 different essays from different scholars. It's pretty interesting. What may be more important for many of you, or not, is on the right, we have this appendix, which we asked one of our scholars, somebody who worked with E. Paul Torrance, one of the original creators of creativity assessment, to put together an appendix of dozens of measures, creativity measures. And not only showing you what those tools are, but where they fit in context. Because many times you'll see people say, oh, we'd like to understand how this child is performing, and we'd like to assess it so that we can get proper funding. This is what we need. But it's hard to get the expertise to know where they fit. So this appendix has been really helpful for many of our partners, for them to know when and where to apply these appendices, where to apply these measures. So I hope that's useful for you as well. Any questions on those particular pieces? Because I think those are our way of trying to support other people.
Is it possible to get them without the QR code?
Yes. Yes. So what you can do is, if you just do a Google of, let me see, Lego Foundation, and then the title of those, you can get to it.
I'll write it down.
So we have a knowledge base. So what you could do is Lego Foundation, and then assessing creativity, or Lego Foundation creativity appendix, or what we mean by creativity. Also, I can let me just share some links. Actually, I'll do that while we're chatting. So I'll put these into the chat. I'm going to stop sharing the screen here. I'll get back to talking with you. There's a link to the PDF for what we mean by creativity. Put that in the chat window in Zoom here. Here's another PDF that has the assessing creativity, the collection of essays. Here is the appendix. How's that look? Yep. And then if you wanted to see more about my pal Amos, who's doing this screen sharing thing, we're seeing this is a need for more and more schools. Sophie Halliday, right? Hadway, sorry, Sophie. You were sharing some resources, a video on how to create a document scanner. So these are things that are becoming very real. And one of the most exciting things about learning by Zoom now is seeing all the way that children and teachers are hacking these platforms, and hacking in a good way. All right, so if I may, I'd like to see where everybody's self-portraits are at. I was always curious about when I was taking art courses in university, and how much smaller my head was on the paper than it was in reality. So I have a large head. And I was amazed at how many things would kind of project through the experience, and how I would have that, I would learn from that process. And so that was kind of one of the things I was hoping we could go through too, is that play allows us to have the uncertainty around what we actually, I mean, I see myself every day for the most part, but why does it become difficult? What's the uncertainty around what I look like? Is it skill? Is it the ability to see? So these are some philosophical questions, but I'm curious if anybody had any kind of conundrums like that popped up.
I think it's a great learning process, because you don't know how to do the thing that has been asked of you, but you've got a real deep knowing that it has to be done. So the purpose is strong, but you haven't a clue how to do it. And so, like somebody in a session yesterday talked about this idea of pedagogies of uncertainty. And I think this is a really good example of a pedagogical approach. It's knowing, but having a clue how to, which is good. Yeah.
Well, who mentioned the pedagogies of uncertainty?
It was in a session Hanneke was running. It was a lecturer from the Edinburgh Uni. And I can't remember her name. Hanneke, can you?
Yeah, Doe. I just shoved out of the way all my paperwork here, but it was Doe something. I can make that connection. She's a university lecturer in Edinburgh.
Very cool. So if I may, what I'm going to try to do is go through what happened for me using this. This is the digital version. I shared my screen now. The digital version of the creative process toolkit. And I'm going to go through kind of what went down for me as I was trying to discuss, but also build at the same time. So I started off wondering, how am I going to pull this off? And then at one point I wanted to understand and listen to other people so that I could see, okay, what are other people doing here? Now I'm using this to build these ideas. I'm listening. And then I decided, okay, now I can start to build these ideas. And didn't really, I went back to kind of listening to other people instead of building again. And then all of a sudden now I said, okay, wait a second, I actually have to start to dare to do this. Okay, so let me get my build here. It's a little, sorry, sometimes I get a little not too good at this. So now I'm building, I need to actually dare to do something here, and I need to actually build this self-portrait, start doing it, and then I'm going to start testing it. And then as I do that, I got to actually start sharing this with people. This isn't just a concept. This is something I actually have to share with people. Now what we're getting at here is, this is me trying to map my process and hopefully understanding, oh boy, I'm not taking things apart at this point. I was probably getting too busy trying to talk, not balancing. Now I imagine there's ways in which some of you went through some of these similar processes where you're wondering, like Paul even said, I don't know what I'm going to, he's asked me to do this. At some level, I want to humor him and do this, but what does that look like in your thought process? And the important part about this, and I think it was mentioned early on, is many times this is about building confidence and building this language for us to talk to each other about creativity. And if we can do this in a playful way, sometimes it involves Lego, many times it doesn't. In fact, we don't need you to be playing with Legos for us to be able to make an impact on supporting children's creativity. But what it does do is it allows us to start to share a language. And I think that's one of the things about coming to a Creative Bravery Festival, coming to these other events, is that we start to feel, like Helena said earlier, like we're not alone. And that if we have a language from which to talk about these things and simplify that language, we can start to have actual experiences and we can talk about it more simply. If we want to get into it and discuss philosophically, that's great too. But I think really what's important for the LEGO Foundation is for us to lead with learning through play experience, where you have joy. You find meaning, something that is personally meaningful for you. Some way it's socially interactive. You want to be actively engaging. We want you to be able to understand that things may not work in the beginning, but if you keep working on it and keep refining it, things will get better. And I think that's really what we're trying to get at the LEGO Foundation, is lead with learning through play. And ideally, if you can develop that experience, that ability to lean on the play to understand and learn about things, that creativity will follow. And also by learning through play, it keeps reintroducing, like Paul said, I didn't know what was going to happen. I don't know how I'm going to do it. There's the uncertainty. And the more you can reintroduce an uncertainty in, dare I say, a safe way, the more likely you are to become more comfortable with embracing it, leaning on learning through play to address it, and then it gets you to creativity. Many times creativity is a reflection on what you've done, okay? You engage in some of these creative processes, but I think that's all I have to say for today. So I would like to open it up for any conversation, questions, comments. So thank you.
Hi, Garrett. Sophie.
Hi, Sophie.
Hiya. My sort of ex-colleague friend, person I work with sort of quite a bit, Nia, and we've just written a paper, but really looking at how creativity to develop it with children and to make them comfortable with exploring it. You really need to also make sure teachers feel that they have permission to be creative as well, and how hard it is, really, how that's been sort of drummed out of teachers to feel that they can be comfortable with uncertainty and to explore different approaches. So as well as a focus on assessment, I think there needs to be a big focus on teachers' comfortableness with being creative. in all ways, really.
Yeah, and that's one of the things that we're in debate now at the foundation, I think, in LEGO more broadly, and I think with many of you and our colleagues around the world, is what are some of the ways that we can support this in classrooms right now, in distance education? Because it seems, I just got an email from administrators from my daughter's kindergarten about the distance learning, and we're like, well, what's this going to look like? And we're like, and their response is, the teachers will take care of it, which is heartwarming, but also like, of course, it's always the teachers taking care of it. And so what we're trying to look at is, how do we support them? It may not be giving them 72 more creative activities. It may be, how do we support them emotionally? How do we give them the means by which to support the children emotionally? But I think one of the conversations we keep coming back to is 3 kind of dominant approaches to teaching education. And there's many more, I'm sure, but these are the ones we keep coming back to, which is, we can teach creativity. So talk about the processes, make these processes less mystified and something that we can talk about. Maybe even breaking down creativity to components of, here's imagination, here's some wonder, here's coming up with a lot of ideas, here's selecting good ideas, here's innovation. And so they kind of get familiar with the language around it. Another way is teaching creatively. So how do we support teachers to take risks? How do we incentivize those risk-taking behaviors? How do we give them some something to say when administrators and teachers come to them and say, well, that's really cute that you're doing this creative stuff, but what is this going to do for the prospects of my child? There is plenty of prospects. There's much literature to support this. These are the better ways of learning. So helping them teach creatively. And then lastly, one of the things we keep running into is these kind of project-based or interdisciplinary collaborations. So how do we get children to work in one context around science, but then how does it tie to another subject? And those subjects all have their own languages. And if you find ways to cross those, we hope that teachers start to work together that way, but also that they feel more comfortable to be able to be creative to overcome those differences. So there's just a few different ways, but really, I think, Sophie, you're talking about something that's really important: the confidence, the efficacy. And another piece that we see with teachers quite often is, how do we get them to realize that they're being creative every day, and that it's not just the artists that are creative? So how do we get them to realize you're already doing it, and so that they start to identify with themselves as being creative, rather than it only being their friends who they've already put in that bucket. Tony, he's the musician, he's the one who's creative. Well, that's true, but so are you, and here's when you do it. So highlight and spotlight those occasions so that it's not so other than something that we all do.
Just like to say a massive thanks there to Garrett. It's been truly inspiring. I think the thing I was struck with was the connect, explore, and transform part of the toolkit. And in essence, that's what the bonfires are about. So look around this bonfire this evening or this morning or wherever you are, and look at the people that LEGO have connected with. But also then a call out to you for your brave takeaway. How can you, as a person, having experienced this, having listened to Garrett, having looked at some of the documents, transform in a small way? I thought it was really interesting. Jane was right. Sometimes it's the hardest bit is putting the first mark on the page. So what today could be your brave takeaway? How can you take something away from this bonfire, a light, a flame, start a conversation with people, perhaps people you haven't connected with, often our peers. It's, one of the most difficult groups to often connect with. What would be your brave takeaway? It's been a wonderful bonfire. It was always something that we dreamed about, to bring Garrett, to bring LEGO Foundation here to the bonfire. But what an incredibly brave and creative organization they are. And so share with us over the course of the next couple of weeks, what is your brave takeaway? What can you do? Who are you connecting with? Garrett, how can we transform assessment and exams? What a beautiful conversation that would be. If that interests you, there's a brave takeaway. How can you start that spark? How can you light that fire? So Garrett, I don't know if you want to say anything else before we close down the bonfire for the evening.
No, I'm grateful for y'all to participate and jump in. I asked you to do something like Paul said, that who knew how to do this beforehand. So I just acknowledge and grateful for people for that. And if you have follow-up questions, feel free to reach out to me and I'll do the best I can. Thank you. I'm humbled, and Paul, Helena, Hanukkah, everyone who's been organizing this, thank you so much. I've felt supported throughout. So